I got so emotional because he became Michael on that screen. It brought tears to my eyes. I couldn't believe it.
April 2026. The red carpet in Berlin is glowing under the lights. The world premiere of the biggest Michael Jackson biopic ever made is happening right now. And there he is, Jackie Jackson, the oldest brother of the Jackson 5, now 74 years old, just weeks away from turning 75. He's smiling for the cameras, standing beside Jermaine and Marlon, even teasing the crowd with the bombshell news. There's going to be a Michael Part 2, but behind that smile, heartbreak. He's already buried two brothers, Michael in 2009 and Tito in 2024. Now, at 74, Jackie Jackson is literally the last man standing. The only original Jackson brother still out there touring nonstop, still fighting to keep the family legacy alive while the rest of the world has moved on. He goes home to a quiet house on the shores of Lake Las Vegas, to a wife and two 12-year-old twin boys who were born when he was already 62. A man raising kids young enough to be his grandchildren. A father who became a dad again when most men are already retired. Net worth around $5 million. But he's still grinding on stage because the bills don't stop. And neither does the weight of being the big brother who sacrificed everything. So here's the question nobody wants to ask out loud. What does it feel like to be the one who held the whole Jackson empire together, only to end up watching almost everyone you loved leave this earth while you're still here, still performing, still carrying the name? If you want the raw, untold, heartbreaking truth behind the glitz and the glory, the real story of the man who was there from the very beginning, then you're in the right place. Hit subscribe to Black Legend right now, turn on notifications, and let's go deep into the life of Jackie Jackson, the brother they called the oldest, but maybe the loneliest of them all. This one's gonna hurt. Chapter 1. The hard childhood and the pressure from a young age. To truly understand the heartbreak that still follows Jackie Jackson at 74, you have to return to the very beginning, to a cold, rainy night in Gary, Indiana, in 1951, when the oldest Jackson brother was never allowed to be a child at all. Gary, Indiana, May 4th, 1951. A cold spring rain tapped against the tin roof of a tiny two-room house on 2300 Jackson Street the night Jackie Jackson was born. There was no nursery, no crib, just a worn mattress on the floor and the thick smell of fried chicken grease and cigarette smoke that never left the walls. The house was so small that one day all 9 Jackson children would share the same cramped space. From his very first breath, Jackie was never allowed to be just a child. He was the oldest son. In the Jackson household, that title carried a weight heavier than any crown. Joe Jackson, a crane operator by day and a tyrant by night, believed the only way out of poverty was through perfect performance. Love had to be earned with sweat and fear, and Jackie, as the firstborn, was the test subject. By the time Jackie turned 4, Joe had already lined up the boys in the living room after dinner. Furniture pushed against the walls, the old record player crackling. "Again!" Joe would bark, his voice like a whip. Little Jackie, barely tall enough to see over the couch, had to learn the steps first. He had to set the example while other kids played outside until the streetlights came on. One night that would haunt him forever, Jackie was 6. The boys had rehearsed for hours. Michael, still a toddler, cried in the corner because he couldn't keep up. Tito's fingers bled from the guitar strings. Jackie missed one simple step. Joe's face turned dark. Without a word, he unbuckled his belt. The leather cracked across Jackie's back, once, twice, 3 times, while his younger brothers watched in terrified silence. "You're the oldest," Joe growled. "If you mess up, they all mess up. You want to be the reason this family stays poor forever?" Jackie didn't cry in front of them. He bit his lip until it bled and kept dancing. That was the moment he understood. His pain was the price for everyone else's future. Even at school, the bruises showed. But in 1950s Gary, No one asked questions about a black family fighting to escape the projects. Jackie learned to wear long sleeves and smile like everything was fine. Inside, a quiet voice repeated the same words every day. You're never good enough. In high school, Jackie became a star football player. College scouts came. One afternoon in 1969, a recruiter sat in the living room and offered him a full scholarship, a real chance at a life outside music. For the first time, Jackie felt hope. Joe listened quietly, then turned to his 17-year-old son and said the words that crushed everything. You're not going anywhere. The family needs you in the group. End of discussion. Jackie stood in the same tiny room where he had been beaten for missing steps, stared at the man who had stolen his childhood, swallowed his tears, and went back to rehearsal. The football uniform was folded away that night and never worn again. That sacrifice became the pattern of his entire life. While the world later cheered the glittering Jackson 5, very few understood that the boy at the front of the stage had already given up his own dreams so his brothers could chase theirs. Even now, at 74, in the quiet moments after the applause fades, that same little boy from Gary still whispers the painful truth he learned at 4 years old. You are never good enough. And the fear that started in that two-room house has followed him for 70 years, through fame, broken marriages, and the deaths of his brothers, all the way to the red carpets of 2026, where the oldest brother is still carrying everything. Because that's what the oldest brother does. He carries everything, even when it breaks him. Hit subscribe to Black Legend right now. Chapter 2. The glittering career but the sacrifice. While the scars of that tiny house in Gary never truly healed, Jackie's greatest sacrifice was only just beginning. The glittering career that would make his brothers legends, yet leave him forever standing in the shadows. Detroit, Michigan, 1964. Snow fell lightly outside the Motown building as 13-year-old Jackie stood nervously at the front of the line. Joe had driven them all the way from Gary in a rusty station wagon, promising this was their one-way ticket out of poverty. When Berry Gordy shook Jackie's hand and said, "Welcome to Motown, boys," the whole room filled with hope. That day, the Jackson 5 was officially born, and Jackie became the anchor that would never move for the next 62 years. Success hit like lightning. I Want You Back exploded in 1969, and the 5 brothers from Gary suddenly appeared on every television screen in America. Jackie led the choreography with calm, steady strength, making every move look effortless. But even then, the spotlight had already begun shifting. Little Michael, just 11, would step forward for one solo line, and the entire audience would lose their minds. Jackie never complained. He simply smiled wider, stepped back, and kept the formation tight. They toured the world in private jets and 5-star hotels, a world that still felt unreal to a boy who once shared one mattress with 4 brothers. Yet behind the screaming fans and flashing cameras, Jackie carried a silent burden no one ever filmed. He calmed Michael during stage fright, mediated Joe's anger in dressing rooms, and held the entire group together when cracks started to appear. The deepest heartbreak came on a rainy night in 1979 inside Motown's dimly lit Studio A. Michael had just finished recording the title track for his solo album, Off the Wall. Jackie stayed late, pretending he was there for background vocals. The truth was far more painful. He simply wanted to feel like he still belonged. He sat on an old leather couch as Quincy Jones played the rough mix. Michael's voice filled the room, smooth, powerful, unstoppable. When the song ended, Michael turned to his big brother with a shy smile and asked, "What do you think, Jackie?" Jackie forced a grin, but his throat tightened. In that single moment, under the low amber lights, he felt something inside him crack forever. He had already given up football, college, and every personal dream for the group. Now even the group was slipping away as Michael's solo career took off. In the decades that followed, Jackie tried to build his own solo path, but Michael's shadow was too long. He became the quiet glue that kept the Jacksons alive through every scandal, lawsuit, and loss. First Michael in 2009, then Tito in 2024. Now, at 74 in 2026, Jackie is still touring with Marlon, still walking red carpets, and still publicly teasing Michael Part 2. But every time the house lights come up, the oldest brother feels the full weight of 60 years of sacrifice. The boy from Gary who gave everything so his family could shine, and who is still carrying that legacy long after most of them are gone. Because that's who Jackie Jackson has always been, the one who shines in the background so the spotlight can burn brighter for everyone else. Chapter 3. The Heartbreaking Marriages and the Hidden Violence. While millions watch Jackie Jackson hold the Jackson 5 together on stage with that calm, steady smile, very few people ever saw the private wars he was losing at home. The oldest brother, who sacrificed everything for the family dream, couldn't seem to build a family of his own that would last. His personal life became a long, painful shadow. 3 marriages, 4 children, and a trail of broken hearts that still haunts him at 74. It started with Enid Arden Spann in 1974. They had dated for 5 turbulent years before the wedding, and the chaos never really stopped. Enid was beautiful, fiery, and fiercely independent, exactly the kind of woman who refused to live quietly in the shadow of the Jackson name. At first, their life in the Encino mansion looked like a fairy tale. 2 young children, Siggy born in 1977 and Brandy in 1982, fancy cars in the driveway, and the constant glow of fame. But behind the heavy gates, the arguments grew louder and darker. Jackie's temper, sharpened by years of Joe's belt and endless pressure, would explode without warning. Enid later alleged physical abuse, claims that led her to file for restraining orders not once, but twice. The police were called. Neighbors heard the shouting. Jackie's affair with pop star Paula Abdul in the mid-1980s became tabloid fuel, the final crack that shattered whatever was left of their marriage. They divorced in 1987. But the pain refused to stay in the past. Then came December 20th, 1997, a day Jackie still cannot speak about without his voice cracking. Enid, only 43, had gone to see a movie alone that afternoon, trying to find some peace in the middle of another custody battle. She never made it out of the theater bathroom. A sudden, massive brain aneurysm struck like lightning. She collapsed on the cold tile floor, alone, surrounded by strangers who had no idea the woman dying in front of them had once been married to a Jackson brother. When the hospital called Jackie, he raced there in disbelief. By the time he arrived, she was already gone. The official cause was listed as a brain aneurysm, but those closest to the family whispered about a deeper heartbreak. Enid had reportedly been carrying an unfinished letter in her purse that night, a letter she had started writing to Jackie weeks earlier, trying to make peace for the sake of their children. The letter was never delivered. Jackie never read the words she wanted him to hear. He stood outside the hospital room that cold December night, staring at the sterile white walls, realizing the woman he had hurt and been hurt by was gone forever. The guilt never left him. Siggy and Brandy, then 20 and 15, lost their mother in the most sudden, cruel way imaginable. And Jackie lost the first great love of his life, the mother of his first 2 children, in silence. The second marriage, to Victoria Triggs in 2001, felt almost like a quiet exhale after the storm. They wed in a private ceremony and tried to build something calmer. There were no screaming headlines, no restraining orders, no public scandals. But the quiet itself became the problem. The marriage ended in 2007 with barely a whisper. 2 people who simply drifted apart under the weight of Jackie's endless touring and the ghosts he still carried from the first marriage. Victoria disappeared from the public eye almost completely, and Jackie rarely speaks of her even today. Then, in 2012, everything changed again. At 61 years old, Jackie married Emily Besselink, a woman more than 20 years his junior. The following year, on New Year's Eve 2013, they welcomed twin boys, River and Jalen, when Jackie was 62. The world called it a miracle. Jackie called the boys his biggest New Year's blessing, but behind the Instagram smiles and the twin strollers, the reality was far more complicated. Emily herself has openly described their life as a wild adventure, code for the beautiful chaos of raising energetic little boys while your husband is already in his 70s. Fast forward to 2026. River and Jalen are now 12 years old, loud, energetic, basketball-obsessed kids who run through the house in Las Vegas like two miniature hurricanes. One ordinary Saturday afternoon last month tells the whole heartbreaking story of late fatherhood. Jackie was sitting on the couch after a long rehearsal, trying to catch his breath, when the twins burst in from the backyard, sweaty and laughing, begging him to play one-on-one basketball in the driveway. "My boy." "Come on, Dad. You used to be a star athlete, right?" River said, bouncing the ball with that effortless energy only children have. Jackie smiled the same steady smile he had perfected on stage for 60 years, stood up slowly, and walked outside. But after just a few minutes of gentle dribbling, his knees ached, his breathing grew heavy, and he had to sit down on the curb while the boys kept playing without him. Jalen looked back, confused. "You okay, Dad? You look tired." In that moment, under the bright Nevada sun, Jackie felt the full weight of the generation gap. A 74-year-old man raising 12-year-old twins who barely remember their uncles Michael and Tito except from old videos. He is the father who sings them bedtime lullabies in the same voice that once harmonized with his brothers on ABC. Yet he is also the old man who cannot keep up with their endless energy. The house is filled with laughter, but it is also filled with the quiet exhaustion of a man who became a father again, when most men are already grandfathers. Through it all, the dark corners remain. The reputation as the violent husband from the Enid years never fully disappeared. His older children, Siggy and Brandy, live their own lives far from the spotlight and rarely appear with him publicly. The twins, as much as they adore him, highlight how late Jackie came to this chapter of fatherhood. At 74, he is still the big brother holding the Jackson legacy together on stage, still teasing Michael Part 2, still touring with Marlon. Yet when he comes home, the house sometimes feels too loud and too quiet at the same time. Jackie Jackson gave up his own dreams so his brothers could shine. But in the most private rooms of his life, the price was 3 broken marriages, 2 children who grew up without their mother, and 2 little boys who will one day look back and realize their father was already an old man when they were born. The oldest Jackson brother learned early how to hold everyone else together. He just never learned how to hold himself. Chapter 4. The Great Losses and the Family Drama. The spotlight had always hidden the deepest cuts. While Jackie Jackson stood strong on stage as the calm, steady oldest brother, the real blows came in the quiet moments when the music stopped and the phone rang with news no one wants to hear. 2 phone calls, 13 years apart, would tear the Jackson family apart and leave Jackie standing alone in the ruins, still trying to hold everything together. June 25, 2009, began like any other hot Los Angeles summer day. Jackie was at his home in Las Vegas, sipping coffee and going over tour dates with Marlon when his cell phone lit up with an unknown number. He almost ignored it. Then he saw the 310 area code, Los Angeles. Something in his gut twisted. When he answered, the voice on the other end was shaking. "Jackie, it's about Michael. He's been rushed to UCLA Medical Center. They say it's bad, really bad." Jackie didn't even hang up the phone properly. He grabbed his keys and drove the 4 hours to Los Angeles in a blur, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. By the time he burst through the hospital doors, the hallway was already packed with family, security, and flashing cameras outside. Doctors pulled the brothers into a small private room. The words came out flat and clinical. Cardiac arrest. Propofol overdose. We did everything we could. At 2:26 p.m., Michael Joseph Jackson was pronounced dead at age 50. Jackie didn't scream. He didn't cry in front of the others. He simply walked out of the room, found the nearest empty stairwell, and slid down the wall until he was sitting on the cold floor. For the first time in his life, the oldest brother felt completely powerless. This was the same little boy he had once carried on his shoulders during rehearsals in Gary. The same voice he had harmonized with on I Want You Back. The same brother he had protected from Joe's belt 1,000 times. Now Michael was gone, and Jackie was the one left to make the calls, plan the funeral, and face the world. At the private memorial inside the Staples Center, Jackie stood at the podium in a black suit, voice steady for the cameras, but his hands trembled as he read the eulogy. Behind closed doors that night, he broke down completely, whispering to no one, "I was supposed to go first. I was the oldest." The years after Michael's death brought more than grief. They brought war. The family fractured over the estate. Jackie, along with the other brothers, fought bitterly with the executors and even with parts of the family about how Michael's billions should be handled. Lawsuits flew, accusations of greed filled the tabloids. At one point, Jackie was so broke from legal fees that he had to sell personal memorabilia just to keep the lights on. Through it all, he tried to play peacemaker, the same role Joe had forced on him since he was 4 years old. "We have to stay together," he would tell his siblings in late-night calls. That's what Michael would have wanted. But every time he said it, the old scars from childhood reopened. The belt, the shouting, the constant pressure that had taught him early that love had to be earned through silence and sacrifice. Then came the second phone call that shattered what was left. September 15th, 2024. Jackie was backstage in a small theater in the Midwest, wiping sweat from his face after soundcheck when his phone vibrated. It was his sister, LaToya. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Jackie, Tito's gone. Heart attack. He was driving. They couldn't save him." Tito, the brother who had played guitar beside him for 60 years, the one who had laughed the loudest in the hardest times, was dead at 70. Jackie stood frozen under the stage lights, the microphone still in his hand. The crew saw his face go pale. For the first time since Michael's death, the last big brother felt the full weight of being truly alone. He canceled the rest of the show that night and flew straight to the family gathering in Los Angeles. At the private viewing, Jackie stood over Tito's casket for almost an hour, not speaking, just staring at the face that had once been so full of life on the same stages they had shared since they were children. Later that night, alone in his hotel room, Jackie poured himself a drink and spoke aloud to the empty room. "First Michael, now you. Who's left? Just me and Marlon, and I'm 73 years old." For the first time in his life, the man who had spent decades being everyone's rock finally admitted the truth to himself. He was exhausted, and the loneliness was crushing. The family conflicts that followed Tito's death only made the pain sharper. Old wounds with Joe, who had died in 2018, but whose shadow still loomed, resurfaced in ugly arguments over the Michael estate. Jackie had to mediate between siblings who no longer spoke. Lawyers demanded meetings. Tabloids printed accusations that the brothers had abused each other as children under Joe's brutal training. Jackie never publicly defended himself, but privately the claims cut deep. He carried the guilt of every time he had stayed silent when Joe raised the belt, every time he had told the younger boys, "Just do what Dad says." Now, at an age when most men sit on porches with grandchildren, Jackie was still the one trying to keep the peace while his own body and bank account struggled. Through every loss and every lawsuit, Jackie remained the quiet fixer. He was the one who showed up at court dates, the one who called estranged siblings, the one who kept the name The Jacksons alive on stage even when his heart wasn't in it. But the price was written on his face. The deep lines, the tired eyes, the way his shoulders slumped when the cameras turned off. At 74, Jackie Jackson has buried 2 brothers, survived 3 broken marriages, raised children across 2 generations, and fought family wars that never seemed to end. He learned as a little boy in Gary that the oldest must carry everything. He just never expected that one day the load would include burying the very dreams he had sacrificed his own life to protect. And still, the shows go on. The smile stays on. The oldest brother keeps moving forward, because that's what he was taught to do, even when there is almost nothing left to hold together. Chapter 5, The Present Life, 2026. Heartbreaking and lonely. And now we look at his current life. Las Vegas, April 2026. The desert sun had already slipped behind the mountains when Jackie Jackson pulled his black SUV into the driveway of the lakeside house he bought for $1.3 million back in 2012. Now the property was worth nearly $4 million, but the money meant little. At 74, just weeks from turning 75, Jackie stepped out slowly, his knees stiff from another long flight. The tour schedule for 2026 was relentless. Bergen Pack in February, Staten Island in May, Rotterdam, Yamava Theater, Sibuna Bremen in Germany, and more European dates still to come. He was still performing, still smiling under the lights, but his body and his spirit were quietly surrendering. Inside the house, the noise hit him like a wave. 12-year-old twins River and Jalen were racing through the living room, basketball in hand, laughing at some video game on the giant television. "Dad, you're home!" Jalen shouted, sprinting over to give him a quick hug before darting away again. Jackie forced that familiar steady smile, the same one he had worn on stage since he was 4 years old, and ruffled the boy's hair. But as he watched them run, something heavy settled in his chest. These energetic, loud, basketball-obsessed boys were born when he was already 62. They called him Dad, yet in their young eyes he was already an old man. The gap between 74 and 12 felt wider every single day. Emily Besselink, his wife of 14 years, came out of the kitchen wiping her hands on a towel. She greeted him with a warm kiss and the same phrase she had been saying for years. "Raising twin boys is a wild adventure, babe." She meant it with love, but Jackie heard the exhaustion underneath. The wild adventure was beautiful chaos, school runs, basketball practice, endless questions about superheroes and video games, while he was still flying across continents to keep the Jacksons' name alive. He would sit on the couch after dinner, trying to play with the boys, but after 10 minutes his back would ache and his breathing would grow short. He would watch them play without him and feel the quiet shame of a father who simply couldn't keep up. Just 2 weeks earlier, in Berlin, the spotlight had found him again. Jackie walked the red carpet at the world premiere of the Michael biopic alongside Jermaine and Marlon. Cameras flashed, fans screamed. When interviewers asked about the future, Jackie looked straight into the lens and delivered the line the world wanted to hear. "There's going to be a Michael Part 2. The crowd erupted. For a moment, under those bright Berlin lights, he felt like the big brother again, the one still guarding the family flame. But later that night, alone in his hotel room overlooking the Spree River, the mask fell. He poured himself a small drink, stared at the city lights, and whispered to the empty room, "How long can I keep doing this?" His net worth sits at around $5 million according to the latest celebrity net worth reports. Enough for comfort, yet not enough to stop. The tours pay the bills, keep the lights on in the lakeside house, and, more importantly, keep the Jackson legacy breathing. So he keeps going, even when his knees protest, even when the flights blur together, even when he returns home too tired to play catch with his 12-year-old sons. The deepest wound is the silence that greets him when the applause dies. The older children, Siggy and Brandy from his first marriage, live their own lives far away. They love him, but the distance is real. The twins adore their father, yet they belong to a different world, one of TikTok and Fortnite. While Jackie still carries the ghosts of Gary, Indiana, and the 1970s Motown nights. At night, after the boys are finally asleep, Jackie sometimes sits alone by the lake behind the house, listening to the water lap against the dock. In those quiet moments, the truth settles over him like the desert chill. He is the last big brother. Michael is gone. Tito is gone. The other siblings have their own paths. Only Marlon remains on stage with him. And at home, he is a 74-year-old man, raising children young enough to be his grandchildren. The man who once gave up his own football scholarship so his younger brothers could chase their dreams, now finds that the only place he still feels truly alive is under the stage lights. There, for 2 hours, he is Jackie Jackson of the Jackson 5. Again, strong, steady, needed. The moment the house lights come up and he walks back into the real world, the weight returns. The broken marriages, the children who grew up without their mother, the younger sons who will one day realize their father was already old when they learned to walk. This is the cruel irony of Jackie Jackson's life in 2026. He spent decades being the anchor for everyone else. Now, in the quiet luxury of a lakeside mansion in Las Vegas, the anchor feels like it is slowly sinking. The oldest brother who sacrificed everything still stands, but the man inside is tired, lonely, and quietly wondering how many more encores he has left. Because even at 74, with a sold-out tour calendar and 2 beautiful 12-year-old boys waiting at home, Jackie Jackson has never learned how to stop carrying the world on his shoulders. And the world, it seems, has never learned how to let him put it down. Jackie Jackson gave up his own dreams, his youth, and his peace, so that his brothers could become legends. Yet at 74, he remains the last one still standing, carrying a weight that never gets lighter. From the beatings in that tiny Gary house to the empty stage lights of 2026, the oldest brother sacrificed everything, only to end up raising 2 12-year-old sons while burying the very siblings he protected. If Jackie's heartbreaking story touched you, hit subscribe to Black Legend right now, turn on notifications, and never miss the real stories behind the legends. Because some heroes never get to rest.